Hi.
Welcome to Sisterhood Sessions.
Join us on the couch every Thursday to talk about love, dating, happiness, and everything in between
From a Gen Z
and a millennial perspective.
We are your intimate sisters, and we're all about entertaining, motivating, and inspiring you.
Now let's get into it.
Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back to Sisterhood Sessions. We're really glad you're here with us again.
Today, we want to give you a little insight on how we kind of grew up.
Yeah, we had super different upbringings.
To say the least.
And we thought it'd be really fun to talk about the differences between them and kind of how they've shaped who we are.
Mm-hmm. Also, like, despite what people may think, is you're not, like, North American. You sound it, but you're not. Which I feel like is where people get confused.
People get super confused.
Such a huge culture difference between, like, us and
Totally.
other North Americans.
Absolutely. It was so funny, actually, like, moving to Canada 5 years ago and sounding like this and having, you know, people who aren't from here stop me in the street to ask me for directions or something. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm not from here either. So, but yeah, it's a super confusing thing. So my background is a lot. I was actually born in the States, but I only lived there until I was 8 weeks old. And in my household, actually, my parents are European, my dad's French, my grandmother's part Moroccan, and my mom is Swiss German. So English actually wasn't a language that was spoken in my home by either of my parents when I was growing up. But I did have a nanny who spoke to me in English, and I kind of grew up trilingual because of that. I'd speak to my mom in German, I'd speak to my dad in French, and I'd speak to my nanny in English. And I guess because English wasn't spoken in my home, my exposure to English was through school teachers who had American accents, and TV. I watched a lot of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, and actually, this is a funny story. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, we lived in South Korea, and we were allowed to watch TV on Sundays, and we got to watch Walker, Texas Ranger, and Xena, Warrior Princess.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and then if we were really lucky and our parents didn't notice that Xena had finished, we would get to watch a little bit of WWE.
Like wrestling?
Yeah. What's his name again? Stone Cold
I could not
Steve?
tell you.
Oh my gosh, it was really fun.
I've watched an ounce of wrestling today.
It was very entertaining. This was the early 90s, you guys, and TV was wild. But anyway, that's why I sound like this, I think, because all of my exposure to English early on was American English.
Yeah.
And it really shaped the way I speak.
Well, do you want to give us like a little insight on where you're kind of from?
How I grew up.
Because if someone asks, like, oh, where you're from, like, you have a hard time
It's
pinpointing that.
It's a really difficult question for me to answer because of how much I moved around growing up. So, as I mentioned, like, I was born in the States, and then when I was 8 weeks old, we left, and we actually moved to Malaysia. And I grew up in Kuala Lumpur until I was probably around 3 or 4, I'd say. And then we lived in Seoul, South Korea, until I was 8. And then when I was 8, we moved to China. And I did a year in Shanghai and 4 years in Beijing. And then after that, I was about 12, almost 13, we moved to Australia. And that's where I went to high school and where I spent my 20s on and off. Because as soon as I turned 18, I was like, cool, I get to continue this life of travel on my own. And so I hopped on a plane and moved to France, and then I moved back to China, and then I moved back to France, and then I moved back to Australia, and then I moved to Sweden, and then I moved back to Australia, and then I moved to Canada.
And you just worked your entire way through it.
I absolutely did. I supported myself mostly through hospitality work.
Well, that's why hospitality is such a cool job, because you can literally pick it up anywhere in the world. You could easily have a holiday visa anywhere, work, live there for a bit, experience that culture, and then move to the next place.
That's totally true. And there's so many different ways you can do it. You can do it like I did and just move to a new country and apply to different restaurants. I did hotel work as well, which is super awesome. But a lot of people do different things. They do yacht work, they do cruise ship work.
You can teach English.
You can teach English, you can do flight attending, you can do Kontiki tours. There are, do you know what Kontiki tours are? They're essentially like group tours you can book, where you go to different countries and they kind of have like just an adventure plan for you, where you do all different sorts of activities as a group, led by a couple of group leaders, generally group leaders. But that's what I mean. You can be a tour guide for that sort of company.
Cool.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can travel the world. And I guess for someone like me who grew up traveling so much, it's a lot easier for me to envision, jumping onto a plane and, just either traveling for an extended period of time or even moving to a new country. I've done it so many times. It's just, for me, it's something exciting and fun. Mm-hmm. But for someone like you,
that's a little terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I have barely even traveled, let alone have lived anywhere else other than Vancouver, BC. Mm-hmm. So what we wanted to kind of touch on today is how that differentiates, and kind of what I had from my experience, but also what Sophie had and has gained from her experiences. Mm-hmm. So me living in one city my entire life, I have a place to permanently call home. If I were to pick up and move anywhere else tomorrow, if anyone is to ask me where I'm from, Vancouver's my answer. And my idea is I'll probably, even if I do move somewhere else, that I'll retire here, or at least in the surrounding area, kind of living in this cool climate of Vancouver where I experience all the different seasons, and you're on the West Coast right by the water. That's home to me. The West Coast is home. It's offered me a lot of stability. I've grown up with my friends. I went to elementary school in my neighborhood, made my longtime best friends there. We went to high school together, and now we're experiencing the world together. Everything's been I can't imagine picking up and moving somewhere else, because my life is here. I mean, I'd like to at some point, and now as an adult and things are changing, and people are changing, our availability, they don't see all the same people I used to. The thought of doing that is a bit easier, but growing up, I couldn't picture myself picking up and moving to maybe the other side of Canada and leaving my friends behind. They were such an essential part of my childhood, is where the area I grew up in, the neighborhood, and my friends and the community surrounding that. Mm-hmm. It's such it's become such a part of who I am. Almost my identity too.
Yeah. That's so wild for me to think about.
And that's the one thing, you and I have shared our stories on other occasions, and we're just mind blown by the other. I know so many people around the world will be born in a city, in a neighborhood, and live in the same home until they're 18, and have that community, have those friendships from 0 to 18. Mm-hmm. And only then does it become a possibility to leave that bubble, essentially, that you were brought up in. And I can understand it on a surface level, but I can't imagine what that would be like the sense of belonging that you would have
the sense of stability is so foreign to me.
Yeah.
I've never had that.
Yeah. Like, I don't even know how to, like, you know, really answer anything, because it's just like, it's the way I grew up and it's what's familiar and what's known to me. And the fact that it's essentially like a foreign concept to you blows my mind. But also what you taught me is that there's a term called TCK, so third culture kid. That's what you are. Like, you've kind of been everywhere and seen everything. And that's your normal. So to constantly like pick up and like relocate and like try something new. That's what you're used to. That's what
Exactly
excites
right.
you. And
It does. It's truly shaped me in a lot of different ways. So the term that you brought up, TCK, it stands for third culture kid. And it's essentially a child who was born into one culture, but raised in a different culture. And so they become an amalgamation of both. So essentially a third culture kid. And there are a lot of studies done actually on people who grow up this way. And a lot of things manifest in their lives that are both positive and negative. And it certainly affects everybody's life in a different way, because everybody's born, you know, with a different personality and a set of morals and values. But the constants are that people who've grown up like this are generally more open-minded, have an easier time adapting to new environments, are good with people, and end up working in people-facing industries. So actually a lot of us end up in hospitality or in hotel work, or politics is another big one, diplomacy. And those are the positives. The drawbacks, things like never feeling like you belong anywhere. And I'll kind of share one of my experiences in relation to that. So the closest thing that I would consider home, the closest country, would be Australia. I moved there when I was really in my formative years, in my early teen years up until my early 20s, a little bit in the middle of my 20s as well. And it's where part of my family still lives today, and where a lot of my closest friends live. However, I sound like this. Just something that, you know, you mentioned. I sound North American. So even though I'm an Australian citizen and I really feel as though it's the closest thing to home that I have, every single day of my life in Australia, I'm met with, "Where are you from?" And I have to explain, and then, "Oh, but you don't sound Australian. Are you sure you're from here? Why do you have an accent? Aren't you from the States? Aren't you from North America?" And it's so jarring because it makes you an other. Like, you're never going to be fully accepted into society. And I know how privileged I am. I'm a white, cis, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, right? There are people who struggle with belonging a lot more than I do, but it is still a part of my lived experience. It's really disheartening not to feel like anywhere is home, and that you struggle with your identity as you grow up, because I have a French dad, so I grew up watching French classic movies and listening to French music. I have a Swiss-German mom, so a lot of German and Swiss-German culture was incorporated into my upbringing. I grew up in different Asian countries, so the food that I crave and, you know, the places I want to travel to and things, that very much influence that part of me. But it's like I'm a fractured mirror, like a mosaic of all of these different places, but I'm not 100% one.
Yeah.
And there is hardship in that, but there is also so much beauty in that. And I think as I was growing up, you know, in my vulnerable formative years, it was something I really struggled with. And then when I came to terms with it, I realized that that's what makes me special, you know? And I'm very, very grateful to have had that upbringing. And if I could go back in time, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. Because also, like, one word I would use to describe you is worldly. Like, I just feel like you have such, like, a unique outlook on life that's also been just, like, very foreign to me. Is like, you know so much about so many different cultures, and you have, like, such a different, like, perspective and such a different lived experience to life. Like, you have so much to offer to a lot, you know?
Thank you.
To a lot of people, to a lot of situations.
That's the thing that I love, is that I'm able to connect on a personal level with so many people. And that comes in really handy in terms of my day job. We'll call it my day job, but because I work in hospitality, it makes it really easy to, because my job is essentially to go up to strangers and create a connection, right, at the very basic level. So it makes it really awesome to, you know, find a level of connection with almost every person I come into contact with.
Yeah. I think you seriously make friends, like, everywhere you go.
That's a byproduct, I think, because here's the thing, I was always the new kid.
Yeah.
Always the new kid at school. So I kind of had to learn how to integrate into new environments more easily.
One thing I want you to touch on is what living in China looked like. Because you've briefly talked about that to me before, and I think it's, like, crazy.
So here's the thing. I'll compare it to this. You grew up in a neighborhood, and you told me about, you know, oh, you would go and visit friends, and you would get to walk to their homes and ride your bikes in the evening and things like that. And to me, when I picture your life, I picture like an American TV show, like Seventh Heaven. You know what I mean? Like, not in a weird way, but like this sort of idyllic North American neighborhood life. That's what I picture.
Yeah, you know, my friends, like, live in the same neighborhood. We all went to, like, the same, you know, if we're really going back to the same, like, elementary school. So we're all, like, in that one neighborhood to be able to go there. So literally a 2-minute walk away was my best friend's house, or whatever that may be. Like, we're all just so close together where I could, you know, go over to my friend's block to play Manhunt with the neighborhood kids over there. You know what Manhunt is? Do you know what Manhunt is?
No, what is Manhunt?
I don't even know how to, like, describe it because I haven't played it in forever, but, like, it's essentially, like, intense tag.
Okay.
But, like, so you have, like, someone that's, like, it, I guess, and then everyone else is hiding. And so as you, the it person, goes and finds people to essentially kind of, like, tag to also become it, you then become, like, a group of people that are it and go out to find all the remaining hiding people. So you want to be careful if you have a hiding spot and someone, like, leaves you, because if then they get it, they know where you're at to get you. And, like, it's just...
That sounds like so much fun.
It's like intense tag is, like, the way to kind of describe it. But that was, like, the game the kids in my neighborhood would love to play. So I'd go over to, like, my friend's block to play that. I would just, like, try and keep track of, like, time through, like, my friend's parents. They deal out, Sarah, it's 5 p.m., time for you to go home. Walk over block and I'm home. So, like, it's just, everything was in, like, one, like, little concise neighborhood.
That's so cute. I'm also picturing, like, people playing hockey in the street and stuff. No?
No.
Well, I'm sure other Canadian kids did.
Probably. Or, like, people in other, like, Canadian cities would go to, like, frozen lakes in the winter to play hockey.
Wild.
Right. I've never done that. I can't skate.
But she's not an activity girl. Like, you don't bike.
Can be.
You don't skate.
I don't bike because
you don't
it's trauma related to
You
that.
don't swim.
Whoa, we don't need to talk about that on here. That's embarrassing. I can't swim. I'd love to learn, but parents little cheeky for not,
Rude.
not teaching me how to swim. I love you.
We're going to censor that. We're going to censor that.
I love you, but I don't know how to swim.
Well, we better teach you because you're going to be swimming soon.
I know, I need to learn.
But to get back to...
A little... Could have taught me, but you didn't. Now I'm going to drown one day in the ocean and it'll be your fault, parents. Love you, though. But just so you know. Kidding. Teasing.
Oh
Not
my
really.
gosh.
It's kind of like a half joke, you know? I wish I learned how to swim.
You will. You have time.
Eventually. But oh my god, the amount of people that are like, you don't know how to swim? I tell someone and it's like a foreign concept. But I find someone else who doesn't know how to swim and then it's like a special bond. It's
You're
like
a
cool.
community now.
Yeah. Like you understand, you know, people hating on you for not knowing.
If you also don't know how to swim, leave your name in the comments because Sarah needs to find her people.
I do. Where's my, you know, non-swimming community? I will wade in the water, but I cannot go for a dive. Putting that on a t-shirt.
We're going to get you those little bubble...
Stop. No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
No, we're not.
Anyway. To get back to what you were asking me to tell you about is how I grew up in China. What happens a lot of times in... I'm using this term because it's how you would describe a country. Essentially, what I'm saying is, in developing countries, they try to create communities for expatriates, so people who are temporarily living in that foreign country, that mimic your kind of neighborhood. So it's a way for, I guess, expats to feel a sense of home when they're living in a foreign country. And oftentimes, those places are called compounds. And the easiest way to give you a mental image of what this looks like is it's essentially like a gated community. So the ones that I lived in were generally like, each home was like a carbon copy of another home. And then they were like grid-like streets. And then there was generally like a clubhouse somewhere in the middle. And the clubhouse would have things like a grocery store, a swimming pool, an events center, just like maybe a restaurant or two. But it's essentially like an artificial village. And so whilst I didn't have your experience of living in an actual neighborhood where you could go and hang out with your friends, I had a version of that living in a compound in China, where you would ride your bikes around
or your trikes.
The neighborhood. Excuse me, I know how to ride a bike, so.
No, but like when you're a really little kid and like they're also fun because they have 3 wheels and only a little step on the back for your friend to like be holding onto your back and stepping on the step and then you're the one pedaling.
We'll get you a trike, Sarah.
No, I mean, no, never again, but it was a fun time when I was like 6.
Oh my gosh. But in any case, so that's kind of how we grew up, was in these sort of artificial neighborhoods. Yeah. Wild.
That's so crazy to me.
It is crazy, isn't it? And so another thing I'll mention is that when... Oh, uh-oh. Sorry.
The tripod wants to be broken. There we go.
It's vintage.
It is. It's like from the 80s.
We make do with what we
I
got.
stole it from my dad. It really is vintage.
So one thing that you do when you grow up in a different country is that you go to an international school. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of countries will have schools where you are taught in that language. So there are American schools, British schools, French schools, German schools, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them are quite large. If there's a large population, say, of French people living in China, then that school is quite large. That was the case for me when I lived in Beijing, because there were a lot of, first of all, people who worked for French international companies, and also kids of parents who worked at embassies. And so our school was like, it was so fun because there were kids from all over the world whose mother tongue was French, but from all different countries, because a lot of different countries speak French. Yeah. So it's really fun. And then there are, events where like different schools would get together and you're all kind of connected because you are kids living in a foreign country, right? So that's fun.
It's just so wild to me. So I think you're curious about like me having lived in one home my entire life. That you're unfamiliar with.
I can't wrap my head around living in one home for my entire life. I want you to try to guess in the comments how many homes I've lived in, because I calculated it. I'm going to tell you at the end of the episode. I won't leave you hanging, but like get a number in your brain.
That's a lot. Yeah, okay, so I still live with my parents. I'm 21 and Vancouver's also super expensive. Mm-hmm. Goal is to move out in like the next couple years, but I also have a little senior doggy at home that I don't want to leave behind, and also it's so hard to find a place that's pet friendly in Vancouver, but also she's a family dog, so I couldn't really take her. It's complicated, but I've had her since I was 5. Love that little girl. I wanna stick it out with her. So yeah, I live at home like with my parents.
So like one thing I think about is every time we moved, mm-hmm. you had to leave things behind.
Yeah.
You cannot bring everything with you every time.
Yeah.
Right? So that meant like leaving things like artwork from when we were kids, or furniture, or clothing, and things like that. And that continued into my adult life. I moved to Canada at 26, 7-ish, with 2 suitcases.
Yeah.
And that was okay for me. But in your home, you have furniture and probably like kids, like the artwork you made as a kid, and you have things that you have owned your entire life. Like you can look around and you can look at childhood pictures of yourself, and there's furniture in there that still you have now that you had when you were a child.
Yeah, so, okay, this is kind of, like, funny because my parents also just didn't move much growing up. So, one thing that I got when I was a kid that belonged to my, like, I've also gotten, like, hand-me-downs from my parents, mm-hmm. which I don't know if, like, you've really gotten because your family's moved so much. So, when I was a kid, I had this, like, little short table and 2 chairs with my dad and my uncle's names written on the back of the chairs. So, I had that in my room when I was a little kid, and we still have it. Now it's, like, tucked in my dad's room. I was like, we don't want to get rid of that. I eventually want to pass it on to my kids. Like, it's super, super cute. I'd have my like little tea sets on there when I was a kid. And then I also, when I kind of outgrew that, I then got my mom's old like little makeup shelf. So it comes with, like, the stool that she had, a matching like little short dresser. On the dresser I keep like my jewelry boxes that I've also gotten as like hand-me-downs from my grandparents. And like my perfumes and everything, and then I keep like my hair tools and my extra makeup in the makeup dresser. But that was my mom's when she was a kid. It's like there's like, it kind of becomes hard because there's like certain furniture items like I don't want to part with, that I want to carry on with me, but also it gets hard like as you eventually start moving. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of crazy to think about. And then there's so many tape marks on my walls from posters I've had when I was a kid.
Oh my gosh.
Like when J14 magazine was like the biggest thing.
Never heard of it.
Oh my god. It was my life. I'd have to get every single new issue and I would have a bajillion posters of Ariana Grande, Zayn Malik, like One Direction, Taylor Lautner, like on my walls. I think I still have like a few photos. But so I took those all off, and just doing a whole paint job of a room I'm living in is so hard. Like, it's easy when you move in, the space is empty. Like, I have not had the time or energy or will to repaint my walls. So I still have a ton of, like, gross, like, paint marks that I have to, like, sand down and eventually repaint. But it kind of serves as, like, a little memory of that, which I love. It's weird. Like, yeah, obviously, as time goes on, you outgrow things. Like, you know, you get rid of old clothes.
Yeah.
If something, you know, couch is getting run down, you get rid of that, bring in a new one. But yeah, there's, like, I've had the same layout of my house my entire life. I've been in the same neighborhood my entire life, and I know how to, like, commute to areas and the distance it'll take because, you know, I've been commuting from one place my entire life. I don't have to get used to a new neighborhood or a new city. I just know where everything is.
Wild.
Like, but it's so, and like I still have a lot of my same neighbors.
Wow, that's so
like I've grown up.
They've
with
known you
people.
since you were a kid.
There's so many people I've known since I was like a baby. Some I'm still friends with, some I'm not, but like there's families and people I have known that all like still live in the same like area-ish.
So here's a cool story that I haven't told you yet. This happened 2 days ago while I was at my job, my day job. You know what that is now.
Your day job.
That we're going to call it that. My day
That
job.
almost sounds like accountant.
No, it's hospitality restaurant work, okay? Let's make that clear right away. Anyway, I went over to this guest and he said he was Swiss. And I was like, oh, that's cool. My mother's Swiss. Let's have a chat about Swiss things. And then he mentioned that he had lived in China. And so I was like, well, me too. And then he said, oh, do you know so-and-so? And I said, yes, I do. So a Swiss man who'd lived in China, who was visiting Vancouver, and we had a friend in common.
That's so crazy.
This is how the international expatriate community works.
Because you have friends everywhere or mutuals everywhere.
That's wild.
Meanwhile, my local corner store that's family owned, they've seen me grow up. And they're like, I remember you coming in for pixie sticks when you were yay big.
That's so cute.
It's so crazy. Like you can find people like all over the world that have like lived a similar experience. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'll have people that I relate to that have like lived in the one place their entire life, all over the world. But they're also two wildly different experiences.
To you, the world is large and scary.
Yeah.
And to me, the world is so small and so connected.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We need to make the world small. For me, I need to travel.
Well, lucky for you. We're doing that soon.
We're crossing Australia off my bucket list.
We're breaking her out of Canada.
At least for a little bit.
At least for a little bit.
But yeah, I think I'd love to live in California.
I think California would suit you.
That's been a dream because it's still West Coast. Mm-hmm. It'd be close to Vancouver.
Yeah, you're not too far away.
Freezing cold like it can be here.
Mm-hmm. You dip your toe into it for sure.
So it's a lot of traveling I need to do. But it's also just like so wild that we like how I've lived is such a normal for so many people, but how you lived is also such a normal for so many people, and they're so drastically different.
Yeah, I think my community's a little bit smaller, but enough that you can have these crazy occurrences where, you know, you meet people all over the world and somehow there's a connection there.
Yeah.
And a mutual acquaintance or friend, and it really brings things into perspective for you about how small the world can be. Yeah, it's pretty special. So, yeah, I guess if you can take anything away from what we've said, it's, you know, there are benefits and drawbacks to growing up in
any which way.
In any which way. It's about what you make of the experiences you were afforded, right? And I'm hoping for anybody out there who grew up like Sarah, but wants to travel, take that first step. Maybe it's just a short holiday. Maybe you're thinking of moving across the world and you don't know if you're capable. I just want you to know that once you take that first step,
it becomes so much easier.
It does.
Keep taking those steps.
And the world has so much to offer, and there is so much to see.
There's also so many resources to make it a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
You know, Google about a country. There's other people that are have, moved there maybe a year or two before you that have written blogs about their experience that you can take in.
Mm-hmm. And I wish for all of you to have the opportunity to see the world, because travel is the greatest gift. Mm-hmm. It really, really is.
Our world is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So much to see, so much to do. So expand your mind and really give it a shot.
You and me, we're going to travel the world.
Yes,
send us photos of your travels.
Yeah. I'd love to know if there are any other TCKs in our community. It'd be really fun to connect and see where that 6 degrees of separation is. If there's any way we're connected somehow. Maybe we went to the same school at some point or another. Who knows?
That could be cool.
Could be really fun.
Found a sequel.
Alrighty.
Let us know how many houses you've lived in.
Oh, I almost forgot. Okay. 30. I've lived in 30 homes in my 32 years of life.
It's basically a home a year.
Basically.
I've lived in one. But I'm also 21, so give me a break.
You have time, girl.
Yeah, I do. And cities are expensive. People are living with their parents for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the normal. Get off my back if you're on it.
On that note, thanks again for joining us, and
we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate your input, so feel free to reach out to us with any feedback, comments, or suggestions for future episodes.
If you would like to support us, please be sure to leave us a rating and review on your favorite platform and subscribe so you never miss us.
See you next week.
Toodles.